All right, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting of the City Council for February 6th, 2023. If y'all will bear with us, we're trying to get the monitors on, and that's working, but we at least are live now. Councilmember Mazzoni called and notified me that he was unable to get off work due to a last-minute work emergency, so he will not be here tonight. And with that, we'll move on to invocation and pledge of allegiance, which will be led by Councilmember Gardner.
Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, Lord, and for the beautiful weather. Father, we appreciate the changes in the seasons and seeing your power through that, God, and we're just thankful for the beautiful day that we've had. God, as we gather here tonight to do the people's business, we pray for wisdom and in all the things that we discuss and decide, Lord. We just ask for wisdom to make the best decisions that we can for all of those involved, God. We're so grateful to live in this city, Father, and thank you so much for all the wonderful blessings that you give us here in Maumelle with our safe community. And we just ask that you bless those each and every day that work in our community to keep us safe and to take care of our city, Father. Please help us each day, Lord, to find somebody to serve and to make someone's day better in all that we can do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next order of business is special guests and announcements. First up is the audit report. So Mr. Coleman, come on down. And Liz, you're gonna plug it in? Well, let's.
But I don't know if you've got signal.
Does everybody have a paper copy? I mean, I can go through it. Or on their laptop.
On the HDMI? Yeah.
You want me to go in?
If you wouldn't mind, yes, sir, I'll continue.
Okay, so everybody should have a copy of a PowerPoint presentation that I put together. We're not going to go through all of this in great detail. I wanted to kind of lay these things out here since it's the first time we have presented the audit. So this is for the 2020 audit. About a year and a half behind. We've got the city where we got the 20 issued. We issued a couple weeks ago. We're ready to get started. Liz says in a couple weeks we're going to get the 21, so we're hoping in a couple months we can get the 21 issued. So overall, as far as the ACFR overview, it's about on page 3. You can see what all makes up the ACFR. It's more than just financial statements.
They don't have the PowerPoint.
Oh.
They have the audit, they have the book, but they don't necessarily have the PowerPoint.
Okay, so the ACFR is made up of the introductory section, the financial section, the required supplementary information, the combining fund information, the statistical information. So altogether about 109 pages worth of document. There's basically 3 things that I touch on every presentation to a city council. One is the general fund. As of 12/31/20, the unassigned fund balance in the general fund was $1.6 million. That, I think, is down a little bit where you would like it to be. That's about 10.7% of future expenditures, budget expenditures next year. I will say at 21, that number turned around. Preliminary numbers as of the end of 12/31/21, you've got about $7 million in unaudited general fund balance. I think there were some timing issues in the 2020 numbers. Liz was cleaning up some stuff. She was new then, if you'll remember. So there was some cleanup stuff in the 2020 numbers. As far as budget to actual, you'll see in the ACFR document, there's a schedule that compares your budgeted revenues and expenses in your general fund to your actual. All of those pretty much panned out. There was a variance in transfers out of about $500,000 over budget. This was caused, There were some grant funds that Liz needed to clean up, and so she transferred some of that money out, but that should not repeat this next year. Another subject matter is the enterprise fund, your sanitation fund. So as of 12/31/20, you ended up decreasing net position by about $360,000. So we never like to see that on the utility fund, but this council approved $230,000 worth of write-offs for some old accounts receivable last year. So what we did, that was pertaining to 2020, so we went ahead and accrued that and wrote it off in the current year. There's about $230,000 in there that will not repeat. So if you take that into consideration with your depreciation, you were cash flow positive in your sanitation fund. The next subject matter I like to touch on is your pensions. So you have 5 different pension funds, 3 at Lotfi, 1 for fire, police, and volunteer. Those are all pretty well funded at year end, 78% funded on the fire and police. The volunteer was 75%, and the APERS was 75% funded. You do have an elected officials pension plan. There's a $1.7 million liability on that. When we came in and worked with Liz, it was determined that that was not being calculated appropriately. So there's about another $750,000 in additional liability that was recorded in these financials that were not recorded in the prior year financial statements. So the actuary comes in, does their thing, and spits out a liability number. So again, it was about $750,000 difference than the prior year. As far as our audit scope, you did receive unmodified clean opinions on your financial statements. Since you have federal grants, we're required to look at your internal controls and then to audit your grant program, which is your coronavirus program. We also we do an attestation engagement on certain state acts that you're required to follow per state law. So all of those are clean opinion. Again, I said the coronavirus relief fund, you had about $737,000 expenditures in that. That was to go to pay police and fire salaries. But no issues that we found to report. As far as internal controls, we didn't have any material weaknesses to report to you. We did have a significant deficiency to report to you. So we looked at duties within the finance department. So is the finance director, does she have too much control? Does this staff member have too much control? We did note in the middle of 2020, there was 1 or 2 people in the finance department, so you did not have appropriate segregation of duties. That has been rectified since then. Liz has a pretty good staff now, so some of those duties are not, have been segregated a little bit more. On the state compliance attestation, we did find 1 issue with traffic tickets. So state law does require completed traffic tickets that officers are done with are filed with the city clerk. I think there's a city policy that says those are not filed until year end. Well, state law actually says that you're required to file those when they are done. So it's just a minor, easily fixed issue there. As far as the audit scope, note 1 of the financials talks about our significant accounting policies. We really didn't talk about any alternative accounting policies with management. As far as judgments, financial statements always have judgments and estimates in them. Your net pension liability and your depreciable lives of capital assets, those are estimates, but we did audit those. And now that I'm done, we're good. But anyway, as far as, you know, the sensitive financial statement disclosures, pension disclosures are always sensitive. Everybody wants to talk about pensions. As far as audit adjustments, we really didn't have any audit adjustments that we didn't work with management on. We did have 4 past audit adjustments. One of them was the $740,000 pension adjustment. We didn't feel like it was material enough to go back into the prior year, so we ran it through the current period. There were some deferred issuance costs still on the books that should not have been on the books per GAAP. And there was a legal settlement that we found during that you made with a former employee that was not accrued at year end. So we went ahead and booked that. We passed on that adjustment. We adopted GASB 84, which required us to go and look at your fiduciary activities to make sure those are recorded appropriately. They are. Really no significant issues with management. I'll skip the future pronouncements. You know, we worked hard to get here. We're really close to getting the 21 issue. We appreciate everyone that worked with us here to be able to get this thing issued, and we're ready to get 21 issued soon. So that's my presentation for the 2020 audit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Councilmember Tierney?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, when you were talking about the significant deficiencies,
Yeah.
that was what you talked about previously in your speech there.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to confirm that you covered all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, since you have a government audit, we're required to put those in writing if they're significant. So a deficiency is kind of like an A level, a significant deficiency is C, and a material weakness is an F, if you want to look at it that way.
But just to confirm, there were no other significant
No, sir.
deficiencies that you did not discuss?
Right.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Mosley?
Yes, sir. In the past, with our past auditors, we had fallen way behind on bank reconciliations from the early teens, I guess, for several years. And I think we've gotten caught up. Were you able to review those, and do you feel like those are being done adequately?
Yes.
and reconciled
Yeah.
as
So
much as possible?
When you engaged us to do your audit, management was in the process of preparing the report for the prior auditor, so we were working with her, she was working to get that issued and then trying to appease us to get the 20 audit issued. So now that we've got that passed, it ought to be smooth sailing going forward.
Okay, all that's current now,
Yes,
as
sir.
far as you know. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Are there any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the audit report.
So moved. Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Gentlemen, thank you for coming out and for the work you've been doing and will continue to do. Next item of business is the approval of the minutes from the January 17th regular meeting. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the minutes.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Looks like it was a very efficient meeting at 11 minutes. Good job.
Thank you. I did the best I could, sir.
All right, with that, we will move on to public comment. The public comment cards I have are all on agenda items, so we will address those when we get to those items. So that brings us to the financial statement review. Liz, come on down.
So obviously you didn't have financial statements in your packet and didn't get them to you today. We're still working on some closeout for 22, partially because we worked to get that book done and published and finished up. So should have 22 pretty much wrapped up by the end of this week. And then we'll probably go on and be closing out January as well. So my guess is that at the next city council meeting, you'll actually get December and January's financial reports. We'll do two separate ones. But everything's going really well with our close. Waiting on like this much information from the next payment for the county, and we should have all that wrapped up. So, sorry I didn't have it for you tonight, though. That was originally my plan.
Thank you. And it's been interesting to watch the rollover in the year-end close with the new software as compared to before. It is, there's a lot less remembering having to go on and a lot more automation, which makes it easy from my end. Unfortunately, that automation didn't set itself up and is an ongoing process that Liz and her team have been working on. So thank you for that.
And we'll add one thing. Just to make sure everybody's clear, the significant deficiency internal controls that we had was that I did the bank reconciliations for 2020 and was also posting journal entries and doing stuff like that. So that was the issue, is that I was the one reconciling everything. And so until about November of '21, when I finally got my staff member in that could, and we were caught up and they could take that on, that still existed because I was doing that work myself. So, but I don't anymore, thankfully.
All right, thank you. With that, we will move on to the Planning Commission report. Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, sir. It was a quick 3.5-hour meeting, so in the interest of time, I'll keep my comments to about an hour for Ms. Williams. A number of items. The first one, which we'll see on our agenda tonight, was the Crash Events Enterprise Event Center. You'll recall this was previously approved in '22, and they came back with a site plan change as well as a new conditional use permit. Both of those items received a due pass recommendation from the Planning Commission. In new business, the Fontainebleau Center Development Plan was extended. This is the property in front of the Country Club of Arkansas Clubhouse, and they asked for an extension on their development plan, and that was approved. Outside of our city limits in the ETJ, the extraterritorial jurisdiction, there was a plat that was approved. And then also coming back to something that's in our packets tonight is the Ascent Development Annexation Package. And this received a unanimous due pass from the Planning Commission for the annexation as well as the land use and zoning maps. Then for Cypress Bend, which is also in our packet tonight, that received a due pass recommendation from the Planning Commission. And then lastly, also in the ETJ outside of Maumelle was a preliminary plat that was approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move on to procedural motion. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to have all ordinances and resolutions read by title only.
So moved.
I've got a motion. Do I hear a second? Motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We have no unfinished business, but plenty of new business, so we'll move right on to new business. The first item of new business is the Planning Commission appointment. I received word from Wes Booker that he couldn't make it tonight due to a prior work obligation. Mr. Hall Ramsey and Tracy Gill, are y'all in here? Tracy Gill, have we heard from Hall? Okay. Okay. Well, that makes it easy. Mr. Gill, would you like to come on down and introduce yourself to the city council? They've received a copy of your letter here in the council packet already, but let us know what you want us to know.
I've been here since '94. I've watched the city grow quite a bit. I've worked with planning commissions in 35 states. I have been busy at work and kind of got to a point in my career where I thought I could give back to our city, and seemed like a logical place would be planning commission. Checked in with Tina. She said that there were 2 openings. At that point in time, nobody had applied. I said, well, I'm going to apply. My goal wasn't to bounce anybody out that was on the board or in commission and wanted to continue on, but that's kind of it. I have a lot of experience with planning commissioners. Nearly all of them have been very good. I've been on this side of the podium in those circumstances, not ever been on a commission, but I guess my thought is my position would be to know and understand the ordinance, support the ordinance, and bring recommendations as they do to you as a council, and go forward. So that's it. If you have a question, I'd love to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Mosley?
I hit my button late to see if anybody else had something, but this thing does take a little bit of time and some insight, and it sounds like you do have some of that insight. I actually talked to you on the phone this afternoon. You've been in front of other councils and actually from the other side of the issue, trying to get things built and that sort of thing. So appreciate that. And I know some of the some of these folks they put in quite a bit of time, sometimes on a very complicated subject, they spend some time, so, and that was one thing I was gonna be asking everybody is their availability for time to make both the subcommittee meeting and the general meeting. And I think I understood you said that you've
Yeah.
probably been able to do that. Those occur on Thursday. And,
And, you know, interestingly, some planning commissions don't have that subcommittee meeting.
yeah,
And my view that's the most important meeting for an applicant, because certainly they have opportunity to come, and that's where the commission can meet with them and hammer out any differences, or at least everybody understand where everybody stands, and then go forward. So as an applicant, I've always appreciated that. Yeah, it's an extra trip, it's extra expense, depending on where someone's coming from, but again, for the business of the city, I think that's crucial.
good, thank you. Have you been able to attend any of our planning commission
I've
meetings?
watched
or
some
what?
online,
Yeah.
and I guess what I would probably say, some of the more colorful ones, and that's been fine, but I haven't come to one in person in some time. I don't know how long it's been.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate that. That means a lot when we're selecting one too. So thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate you putting your name in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Gill? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What we're gonna do is we've got 2 positions to fill. We're gonna vote for position 4 first. Once position 4 is filled, we will vote for position 5. So you'll have 3 options for position 4 and 2 options for position 5. Don't want to overcomplicate it. Please make sure you check the box and make it so that your name is legible, please. Position 4 first. They're both equal terms, but 2 seats. And 3 applicants, and 1 that was able to make it tonight. I feel like the room is heavily weighted with people sitting on one side, wondering if that means anything or not. We have, we do not have a majority. We have 4 votes for Mr. Ramsey, 3 for Mr. Gill. I'll go ahead and, Mr. City Attorney, is it your opinion that I can vote to pass an appointment for the Planning Commission?
Yes, that's right. Consistent with the last analysis I did, yes.
Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and vote in favor of Mr. Ramsey, which gives him 5, and he fills position 4. Next up, position 5, vote. I would hope there wouldn't be any votes for Mr. Ramsey. Outstanding, Mr. Gill. Thank you very much for applying, and you have been selected. And so if you're a real glutton for punishment, we've got a lot of planning commission stuff going on this evening, but you're welcome to stay, or you're welcome to get your last reprieve before. Yeah, I know, that's what I was thinking, bride and groom, but it looks like they're all on one side. I don't know. Nonetheless, thank you for applying, Mr. Booker. I know you were unable to make it. Thank you for applying as well. With that, we will move on to the next item of business, which is Resolution 2023-01, approving a conditional use permit. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, Resolution number 2023-01, a resolution granting a conditional use permit for an event center in a PCD, Planned Commercial District, zoning district.
All right, we do have public comment cards for this. What I'm going to do is have Mr. Grummer come down and just give an overview of what this resolution is. If you have any questions immediately for Mr. Grummer, we can address those, but as soon as he's done introducing the resolution, we'll take the public comment cards before we just generally open the floor to the City Council. Mr. Grummer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. As Councilmember Gardner mentioned, this came before you back in January of 2022 for approval, which it was approved. Prior to 2022 and up to November, there's been a total of 18 public hearings on this issue concerning zoning changes, conditional use changes, development plans, and such forth. In 22, there was a rezone from PRD to PCD, a conditional use permit for an event center, and then a development plan for a 12,000 square foot and event center with occupancy of 350. As far as this conditional use, what has changed from January of 2022, you'll notice number 1 is Crash Events Enterprises LLC. That changed from the previous Northwind Holdings. And then, bear with me here. Number 2 did not change. On the there was a number 3 that was taken out, which was a requirement for the property to be rezoned to PCD. That actually happened back in January, so that item was actually taken out of the conditional use because it is now a planned commercial district. The number 3 that is there, again, no change on that one. And then number 4, what has changed is the minimum, it must include a minimum of 335 shared parking spaces for both uses combined. In January of 22, it was 165 spaces, but it was specific to the event center. So on this one, we wanted to make sure that there was no confusion, so that the total spaces, since there's going to be shared parking spaces for both events, both the country club and the event center, would be an aggregate of 335 total. But the separate parking requirements for the event center are shown as one of the exhibits. But anyway, that's what's changed on the conditional use, and I can answer more questions concerning that when we get into the development plan, if you like, or on this one as well. The rest of my comments really pertain towards the development plan, but I'll leave it simple on the conditional use unless the mayor wishes for me to expound a little bit more.
If you feel like it's pertinent to the conditional use permit, go for it. If there are details of the preliminary development plan, it may be easier to address those at that point.
Maybe. So there's been, so I'll just go through. Back when this came through, there was public comments, originally around 42 supporting, 52 opposing, but since then, the public has gotten a signed petition, which I believe has been emailed out to the council members, which include over 200 residents in the area. So, of course, a lot of those residents, or some of those residents, are here tonight. There's been, I know, meetings between the developer and the community in order to try to work out some details and work together on some things. Otherwise, I'll just be a little bit more specific on the parking. That was one of the items that was brought confusion to the Planning Commission, and at the meeting it was probably a little bit confused. So the Exhibit B that was provided I put that together out of what came out of the Planning Commission as well as comments from residents. What was approved, there was a variance that was approved for two things. One was to allow for pervious pavement in overflow parking. That was approved, and then a variance to allow to exceed the distance of 500 from the venue, which would allow for the shared parking with Maumelle Country Club in the case that there may be larger events that won't accommodate on site, because that parking is approximately 1,000 feet from the venue. On the map itself, I highlighted the areas where on the development plan would be shown as pervious. So you can see the difference between what would be pervious versus impervious paved parking. The total requirements for the event center was 200 parking spaces, and then the total for Maumelle Country Club basically is 135. Of course, MCC does exceed that in the number of spaces they have around their place, but just the minimum that we look at that they would need is 135. That's where we came up with the total 335 between the two. On site, they have 83 impervious or paved parking spaces. There are 47 pervious spaces, which is considered to be pervious concrete or pervious pavers that allow for grass to grow through, but you can drive on top of. All those are considered paver types. And then 12 golf cart spaces. So the total number of vehicular spaces on the actual development site is 130 vehicular spaces if you include both pervious and impervious. And then 12 golf carts. So the total on site would be 142. So that's an increase from the previous approval, which the previous approval was, and I don't know if the council members would need or not. I did actually print off a comparison between the two, the previously approved and the currently that's in front of you. Would that be beneficial to see how it's laid out? I can hand that out if you like. So you'll notice that on the top one, that's the previously approved, the orientation of the building is more east-west, where on the new Venue 10, it kind of shifts a little bit more northeasterly. The number of parking spaces has increased on site, so they can accommodate more cars on site this go-around versus the last, but still trying to keep with the intent of the golf course being green. So, and that should... Otherwise, elevations are similar, but same quality as before. And that's all that I have.
Councilmember Mosley, you had a question? Excuse me, a question for Mr. Romer?
Sir, I attended the Planning Commission meetings, and from what I understand, you know, these four conditions that we've got on the conditional use, and then there's some also back there on the preliminary development plan. I understand that the council also has the ability to add conditions to these things. If we vote in the majority on various conditions, we can add conditions. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's something we need to bear in mind here. This has been a very longstanding, kind of a critical thing. It's probably one of the most important land development projects that has come up since I've been a councilman back in 2012. And I think it'll behoove us to try to get this as right as we possibly can. I've got at least a couple of conditions I'd like to try to add, and I know the resident group had emailed everybody late in the day with some ideas too. So anyway, I want to go ahead and proceed the way the mayor would like to, but I just hope that we can give this very careful consideration as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we'll move on to public comments. I have 4 public comment cards. I'll take them in the order that I have here. When you get called down, please come down, say your name and address for the record. First up, I've got Jerry Parker. Come on down. And then we have 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'll be relatively brief. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank Brent and Chris for the efforts that they've put forth to concerns with the residents, the time they've taken, the effort they've put into explaining their position, and their willingness to work with us on the concerns that we've had. Much, much appreciated. Mr. Mosley has been front and center. Just as soon as we found out, he was made aware that we knew that there was an event center it looked imminent at that point. The other thing I want to address is how it got as far as it did with the residents, surrounding residents, closely surrounding residents not being made aware. I understand there's a 300-foot rule that determines who will be, if you fall within that 300-foot area, then you'll be informed if there's going to be a rezoning or a development of some type. In this instance, nowhere near adequate. You can visit that site and you can look beyond that property, and just beyond 300 feet, numerous residential properties that had no idea this was even being considered. We were aware of the first, I think there was a 20-unit condo development. The country club had asked us all, the community, the residents there, to get on board and help them fight that. And as soon as that was defeated, we did not hear about we didn't know about the 5 residential proposal. We certainly didn't know that the property was being considered for rezoning commercial to allow an event center into that space. We've been opposed to it. We remain opposed to it simply because we don't feel like that a residential community like Maumelle should blend commercial and residential space. The potential for disruption is for our lives is great. That being said, I will say again, the Ashcrafts have just been phenomenal in their efforts to hear our concerns, to offer to work with us, and we do appreciate that and will continue to do so. But as a city, I think we should take a hard look at the rules, the hard rules we've set for notifying residents anytime there's a potential rezoning that could impact numerous households. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And just for the record, your name and address, please.
I'm sorry. Jerry Parker, 15 Parr Drive.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jody Parker. Name and address for the record, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jody Parker, and I live at 15 Parr Drive. My husband and I have lived in Maumelle for over 20 years, and in the house that we live in now for over 20 years. A small group of residents have had the opportunity to work with Mr. Ashcraft over the last week to minimize the surrounding residents' concerns, and we appreciate his efforts in doing so. We still have concerns of which we hope will be resolved through conditions added to the resolution, as well as continued open discussions with Mr. Ashcraft. Brent knows how we feel about having an event center in our backyard and the neighborhood. However, he has made every attempt to work with the residents to ensure our concerns are heard and to minimize those concerns. We anticipate this relationship to continue. We wish to thank Commissioner Landis and Commissioner Fisher of the Planning Commission for their due diligence and their questions and concerns that they asked during the expansion proposals which were presented to the Planning Commission in November of 22 and January of 23. We also wish to thank Mr. Grummer for providing critical data and taking the time to provide us with requested documentation, even with limited staff. And lastly, a special thanks to Councilman Mosley for taking all of my phone calls and my emails and joining our joint meetings and our continued efforts to maintain harmony between the residents, the city, and the Ashcrafts. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Next up is Keith Bennon. Come on down, you're the next contestant. Name and address for the record, please, sir.
Keith Breen.
Breen.
100 Quapaw. I share the residence with Diana Bennon. We are on record as opposing the event center. I am filled with dread of having 135 parking spaces across the greens area, level with my bedroom, my living room, my upstairs balcony, my downstairs patio. We have talked with Brent and Chris. We appreciate their efforts. And it is our hope that the conditions we talked about and the remedies will be a part of the conditional use permit. We are, like I say, we have dread of what we might be facing, what we might be looking at. We also have hope. And that hope is based upon the meetings we had with Brent and Chris, and that it may end up being attractive. It may be something that we'll like looking out at. Kind of scared of 135 cars sitting over there, headlights, whatever. They promised to try to address the blocking the headlights and stuff. But I really hope that you tonight will put it as a part of the conditional use permit. Some of these things that will be required to minimize, well, I did it again, the effect of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Mike Holligan. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Mike Holligan, and I live at 20 Sandtrap Drive. You know, I do not blame any developer for trying to develop any business. That I have no issue with. I do have an issue with the way MCC and the city handled the event center posting before December 7th, 2022. And that's all I'll say about that. You cannot fix, up here, you can't fix the rift you created between the event center and nearby residents. You have put their venture under a microscope. So I do wish you guys luck. You know what I said. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, we do have applicant and applicant's representative. Did y'all want to say anything or just wait and see if there's any questions?
I just want to, Brent Ashcraft, 2 Green Oaks Cove, and the applicant, one of the members thereof. What started a long time ago, and I appreciate y'all's patience in this whole matter. But when the cow left the barn back in November, December, this thing started as the ugliest form of trench warfare being carried out on social media, which is no place to conduct business. And I'm proud to say that the conversations, rather than devolving, have evolved. And I've been fortunate to meet what I believe are some of the finest people Maumelle has to offer, even though we have a difference of opinion on how this event center is going to be carried out in the future. So I thank them for their willingness to sit down at the table and hear us out and not just tell us no. I'm going to be on the record thanking them. They put out a list of additional things that they want considered, and we've had some extremely productive talks from mine and Chris's standpoint. And the issue they had was that they felt like we were only looking out for the country club's interest, and looking back in the rearview mirror, I can see why they thought that. But it doesn't behoove us as business owners to only serve the country club's interest when we have so many residents nearby us. And I pledge to them, and I pledge to you guys, I pledge to the city and anybody that may watch this recording, that going forward, whether we get this plan approved tonight to expand or we are reverted back to the originally approved plan, that no matter what goes on, that just as I sat at the table with those residents yesterday, if a meeting were called tomorrow, I'll be willing to sit there and continue to work in the same spirit. I think that some of the things that are being proposed by them are going to be difficult to put on into the code. I think the spirit of where they're headed, I think that we all can agree that they're in the right place. And so you have our commitment as business owners, the residents do, to always be good neighbors and always keep the lines of communication open and do everything we can to be good neighbors. Give that same pledge to the council as business owners in your city, that we hope to, through all of this, has set an example for any contentious battles to come in the future of how people are to act in the course of civil discourse itself. And so if there are any questions, I'll yield to them. I would like to hit a couple of the high notes of why this thing's back in front of you guys. And that is that the floor plan's expanded by 4,000 feet. And that was done for two reasons. One, we added a second room into the facility itself. This thing's a wedding venue. There were a lot of questions about the types of events that we were looking to host. I said it last year in this same room, in front of the same council, one new face. But we're intending to host weddings. We're a wedding venue. Are we going to have charity events and parties? Of course, but we're not looking to host tough man competitions, and we're not looking to host taxidermy expos, and we're not looking to host job fairs and things like that. That's just, you can look at our floor plan, it just doesn't allow for it. But with the addition of the second room, with us being primarily a wedding venue, we had one main event room in there. And so, respectively, a couple was to come in, get married in the room, and then between the ceremony and the reception, they would then be turned into the halls and onto the porches and out around the building. We added a second room now so that they can walk into the event, they can have their ceremony on one side and not be stuck out around the building. So the expansion itself is a minimization of the footprint in our opinion. Secondarily, we've added storage underneath the building to allow us to house our own tables, chairs, and other accessories that go along with an event like this, to reduce the number of vendor trucks coming in and out of there. That's the main reason. And also we've taken a partner in Stephanie Krauser, so we did have a name change in the ownership of the event center. So Northwind Holdings is where the permit was approved. Just so you guys understand, Crash Events Enterprises, which a tongue-in-cheek comment was made in the last one. It sounds peaceful, but it's just Krauser and Ashcraft put together. But Northwind Holdings itself, who's the original permit holder last year, is a 50% owner of Crash Enterprises. So we're same people, just a new face involved. And so the other pending item, as I sent to you guys last week, this whole thing was hanging on a parking agreement with Maumelle Country Club being executed. That is executed and has been filed with the city. So the parking agreement is in place. I know that was a question I was undoubtedly going to get here. But that being said, I'll open up to anything you guys want to know.
Thank you, sir. We'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. If there's any questions, we know where to find you.
Okay.
Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, first of all, I've got to compliment the Ashcrafts, and I'll probably say Ashcroft before it's over with. I've been going back and forth. But appreciate you guys reaching out to me after the planning commission, wanting to give me a tour and kind of give me some ideas. Their contention has been that this new plan is no more detrimental to the neighbors and so on than the first one as far as activity and parking and that sort of thing. And they reached out to me, and I asked them if they would allow me to invite some people from the opposition group, the 200 folks that signed a petition, and Mr. and Mrs. Parker came, and we had, I don't know, I guess we met out there in the cold for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and about froze ourselves to death, but he gave us a very thorough tour of the country club area and their proposed site. And I found that, and I think the Parkers found that extremely valuable to have. It gave us some perspective on what they're wanting to do, and we were able to discuss a lot of the concerns as we went around during the tour. A lot of those concerns are just noise, amplified music, lighting, some things that would be, those are probably the most important things that there's concern. There were a lot of concerns. Mrs. Parker she emailed everybody today a list of several concerns that would be, she would like to see amended, see the conditional use amended and the development plan amended. And she actually has about 2 or 3 times this many on the list, and I asked her to pare them down just for tonight so they didn't look quite so overwhelming. But what I think I would love to see everybody do, nobody else has had that opportunity, I don't think, to take a tour and really look this thing over and see what the effect is on the on both the country club and the residents. And if I hadn't taken all this, I would have just been strictly a no vote, because I just wasn't aware of some things. So what I think we can get to a good plan by everybody being informed and kind of looking at some of these conditional use options and trying to implement some that are good. I've got 2 for sure I want in there. One is to limit the capacity to 400 people, which Mr. Ashcraft is in agreement with. And also I want to attach the latest parking plan because it's been evolving, and I wanted the final one attached in the conditions so that everybody knows what the final one was. But what I would like to ask is that we defer the actual vote. We can discuss this tonight and everything else, but this is this kind of goes back. We had a council member that the mayor would remember named Preston Lewis, who came up with a plan on some things where it was involving a resolution, but it was a very important matter, something that really required some thought, where we would like to have had 3 readings or something to discuss them all over. And so at the time we decided on those kind of things, we would have basically 2 meetings. We'd have the first meeting discussion, we'd defer the vote to the next meeting and finish up discussions and that sort of thing there. And that's what I'd propose we do. I would love to see everybody take a tour with Mr. Ashcraft, or his designee, or however we can do it. We might have to ask the city attorney if they can all go together, or have to go one at a time. But and also it would give some of the residents a chance to take that same tour. He's offered that to the residents that are not that familiar. So please tell me what you think, and I'll make that motion here after we discuss it a little bit.
Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this project has been discussed going on a year and a half now in one form or another. I'm not sure what 2 more weeks is going to accomplish at this point, honestly. I'm actually, I appreciate the tour that I also received from Mr. Ashcraft of looking at the property. I believe you mentioned the 400 capacity. Wasn't that in the Planning Commission? So that's, do we even, I'll ask you, Mr. Grummer, do we even need that as a conditional use since it's already in the planning commission?
Well, and one thing I'll point out, there was a letter in your packet from the applicant on that, and it stated 500, but that was back in December. Actually, the January letter that came out stated 400, and in the planning commission, it was stated that occupancy of 400 should be changed on the development plan, which the occupancy is notated on that development plan.
And then, Mr. Mosley, what was the other one that you said?
I think on that one, we talked about that this afternoon. I think we agreed it probably was good to make that a condition, since wasn't there some vagueness about that?
Well, so in my opinion, it could go either on the conditional use or the development plan. As far as going on the development plan is, it has to go through the same process as a conditional use for an amendment. But if it's on the conditional use, then if the occupancy is at 400 and they're a good steward and they want to come back and up it to 500, maybe down the line, they'd come back for an amendment to the conditional use for that. It seems kind of natural for me to have it on the CUP, but again, having it on the development plan still forces that process.
Okay, I think the answer was, it's probably best to put it on there.
What was your other one that you said?
The parking, the final parking plan, it's just basically just a picture, I think, that was included on the online packet, is that correct? That's the final thing?
So that's a clarification, and being that it is a shared parking agreement between the country club and the event center, it's listed as exhibit, I believe, Exhibit B on in your packet. So including that tonight under your approval of the development plan as Exhibit A and B would accomplish that.
Oh, just by voting on it tonight would?
Well, so the development plan itself, everything that is approved, which by the ordinance, I believe.
The parking is in Exhibit B to the preliminary development plan, and the first item of business when we get to the preliminary development plan is going to be to move to amend the body of the resolution to not only incorporate Exhibit A, which it currently does, but also to incorporate Exhibits B through E.
Okay.
They're all there, we just didn't make reference into it, and so we want to just make sure that those exhibits are also incorporated in the, and as part of the preliminary development plan, should we get that far.
Okay, that does what I'm trying to do, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grummer.
Is there any other discussion? Someone's going to hit their button eventually. Councilmember Gardner?
Well, I know we're dealing with two separate things. I had some comments, but I think it relates more to the preliminary development plan, but I guess since they're tied together, I'll go ahead and mention it here. One thing that struck me when I visited the site was the plan that we approved back in December of '21. I actually think this is a much better plan because it shifts the building further away from where residents are located. And so it completely reorients the building and moves it away. So that comment was made at the Planning Commission a couple of weeks ago, and when I started looking at it, I completely agree because it's shifting the building around. And so I know there was a lot made about the occupancy going to 500, but Mr. Ashcraft, and I've not Googled this for myself, but the average wedding size is not going to be anywhere near that. So I would never, I just don't expect that large of an event, for a wedding. So that wasn't a concern for me. And also there was a lot of discussion about expanding from 12 to 16,000 square feet. But when you look at the footprint of the building, it's really not changing by a whole lot. It's just they've added a 4,000 square foot lower level to it. So, that didn't concern me either. So, I'll mention that, but I know that's also part of the preliminary development plan, but it all kind of goes together. I felt like this plan was actually better than the one that was approved previously, so.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
I don't know, I guess I was just going to ask the other council members what their thoughts are on deferring, whether you would like to or not, and what your concerns are with what we've got here, if there are any.
Councilmember Shin?
My concern is the parking. When I was doing construction, our company did a lot of work over there remodeling condos and such. Some of those tournaments bring in a huge amount of autos and trailers, bringing carts in and such as that. And I've seen them lined up out to a country club. And if you've got a large tournament and you've got a large wedding, I don't know that there's enough parking there. I question that. Because you're gonna figure if there are 400 people at the event center, they're coming generally 2 to a car. So that's 200 cars right there. And that's my big holdup on what I see here is I'm not sure there's enough parking. Because whether it's a wedding or not, I think you're gonna draw a good crowd.
So, part of this whole design and all the planning that went in with the country club itself it's two-part here. So we're surrendering the use of the facility itself to the country club on at least 3 of the major events that happen every year, being the 4-ball, likely the Maumelle Classic, then Oktoberfest, which is the member guest that happens every year in October, obviously, and outside of those, so we won't even be using the facility during those tournaments. The club will have free reign of it if they like. Outside of that, our goal is to, and one of the things we've worked out with the club is basically to try and contain our event times into the late evening. Maumelle Country Club is a very group golf-centric club. We typically tee off, the masses tee off between 8 o'clock and noon, and that's Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If you go out there during the middle of the summer, during the height of golf season at 4 o'clock on any afternoon, Monday, Thursday, Saturday, whatever, you're gonna see what looks much akin to a ghost town, because the club's not open for service.
Sir, I've worked out there quite a bit.
Yes, sir, I understand that.
And it's tournaments throughout the week. It's not just on the weekends.
Yeah.
And I expect you will have the opportunity to do events other than just on the weekends.
Well, I understand,
And not just before 4 o'clock.
You should also know I'm the acting tournament chair for Maumelle Country Club, so I have the schedule in front of me. I've helped set it up this year.
I have more issues with the country club than I do you.
Yeah, well,
So-
I understand that. We're doing everything we can to avoid having 2 major events going on at one time. I mean, again, there are tournaments that come in every year that are not those 3 that I listed, that there are trailers parked up in that annex, but I think that the likelihood, considering that we're showing, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may be for Mr. Grummer, but showing the 335 spaces is a number that he came to based on if both facilities were at capacity at one time. Based on the average stats of how big a wedding is, we're rarely gonna be at 50% capacity. And I understand you have to play the worst possible, scenario, worst case, but I think that some reason applied to it would say that this is probably not gonna be an issue, and given that the parking lot structure itself is gonna have to be improved so greatly by us that it's no longer gonna be a gravel lot where 6 trucks can come in and take up 30% of it. It's gonna be lined and marked and all that, so what appears to be a major traffic jam up there will be sorted out some just by having organization to the ground in the parking lot itself.
Thank you, sir. Do you have anything else, Councilmember Shin?
Next meeting.
Council members, you're not Councilmember Saunders. Grondal?
Thank you. I just want to kind of reiterate what Mr. Gardner said about turning the building. I think that's having it in a kind of a different angle is going to make a big difference. And I just want to give kudos to Mr. Ashcraft. I've seen a lot going on in social media over the past several months where residents were very upset. I can understand them being upset without having all the information. But I watched as you very patiently and diligently answered those questions, and I feel like you've done everything that you can and gone above and beyond. That being said, to the residents as well, kudos to each one of you who have come here today. That's what this is for, and so I appreciate all of you coming and being a really good community member. And as far as your area, I understand you wanting to ask questions and making sure that you have all the information. These are all legitimate questions, but back to what Gardner said, it has been going on for a long time. And as a nonprofit professional who have done many, many events, golf tournaments at that very country club, I do kind of understand what this is going to look like. And I think putting tree lines where maybe you could look out and you could see highlights, car lights. But I think you're making contingencies for that and working with the residents, and I would continue to encourage for you all to continue to work on that. But I see it working out. So I see, as somebody said a couple of times, that there is hope, and I think this would be a great event center. I know nonprofits would really love to have some beautiful space like this. We don't have a lot of venues. We look for venues like this. It's a struggle. And most of our events are, somewhere between Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They're not typically throughout the week. But I did hear you say that there would also be kind of a curfew where we would try to cut that off, which I think is respectful as well. So I just wanted to say that, but I also wanted to ask this question before we vote on anything. I want everybody, because there's been so much said, I just want to be very, very clear on as what we are voting on tonight before we vote.
I suppose that depends on what motions are made and what seconds there are. Councilmember Holt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I visited this afternoon with Mr. Roush, and I had put in a phone call for him to find out. I explained that my ward, Ward 4, is on the extreme north side of the city, and whatever happens in the country club has nothing to do with the people of my ward. I don't know how many people of Ward 4 might belong to the club, but I would suspect probably not, maybe not very many. After speaking with him, he felt like that he had received all the cooperation and the very best effort that could possibly be put forward, and that, as he used the term, the ship had had sailed away, and that we need to group together and make the very best of it that we possibly can. I called him and told him that it makes, I'm calling so that I will know how to vote. I don't have a dog in the hunt, so to speak. But my emails do not match the enthusiasm that I heard this afternoon. I want to do what I represent the people. It's not for me, it's for them. If my people want it, I want it. If my people don't want it, I don't want it. If it still is on the up and up and legitimate. So I'm having a struggle. When I hung up the phone from him, I said, well, if you want it, well, I'm gonna vote yes. But there does seem to be some real resistance out there, and those people are the taxpayers, and I want to do the right thing, but I have to tell you, I don't know what the right thing is. I don't want to feel like that I have voted to force something on someone that they don't want. But I have an obligation to vote and to make a decision. So what is best, I'm open to anybody that can, there's both good sides on both sides. Where do we stop? We'll see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gardner?
Mr. Holt, kind of to sum up my thinking on this, and I stated this earlier. I know there have been a number of people email us that are opposed to an event center, period. And that's been my take on it, is they were opposed to an event center, period. And a year ago, we approved an event center, and Director Grummer passed this sheet out. And my take on it is, if we do not pass the revised plan, an event center is going to be built closer to their houses and that faces some of their houses, because that's what's already been approved. They can readjust their business so that Northwind Holdings has another partner, and a conditional use permit has already been issued to Northwind Holdings, and we've already approved this other plan. So an event center will be built. It's just a matter of, do we have one that was a little bit smaller and closer to the houses, or do we have one that's what the applicant wants, that's got better use of space and it's tucked further down in a corner away from residents? So, in my takeaway, and I understand there were residents did feel like they were blindsided by this, and yeah, I totally understand. And this is a unique property that our code for notifications did not fit. And that's maybe we look at that and find a way to modify that somehow. But this was a very unique situation where our notification ordinances for planning changes, it let our residents down. But that's not to fault the Ashcrafts. They did everything that they were asked to do by city code. And this has gone through multiple rounds. I think we're on month number 4 total, if you count the previous time of planning commission that this kind of went through. So it's been discussed and it's been discussed a lot. So that's kind of my take on it. They're going to do something whether we vote tonight to approve this one or not, because one has already been approved. And personally, and I viewed the site today, I wish them all the best in the world. I think it's a gorgeous setting for where this will be located. And I think they have done a really good job working on their landscaping to come up with a plan that will shield residents, from if they see lights at night, and so be it. And from the way this is sitting, the people that will be outside for the venue on the back area, that's all away from the residences, versus this other plan where they would be mingling possibly outside facing some of the houses. So, we have a choice of, do we let them go ahead with what's been approved, or do we approve a plan that I feel is better and works better for the residents and for the applicant? So.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Shin.
Well, I agree with what Chad has said. I also have questions because I've had people reach out to me over the last 6 weeks. When this was presented to us the first time, we had representatives come that said they represented the country club and that the country club supported this. Well, apparently a handful of representatives did support this, but I'm not so sure all the members did. And I've had a lot of members invite me to lunch, ask me to their homes, and they're not happy about it because they feel like they were held up in support of something that they weren't. And that's where I run into a problem. I believe we need this. I think your plan is sound. I really think 3 years from now, you're gonna have more events like she's talking about than weddings. But my question is, were we led down a path a year ago by the country club? Because some of the members are saying we were. So that's my concern. And I noticed none of those folks are here tonight that were here a year ago.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Williams.
I also agree with what Councilmember Gardner has said, that it's gonna, this has already been approved. This has already been brought before us. And I do think the Ashcrafts have done their due diligence and done what they were supposed to do to comply. I think that moving forward, we need to address the 150-foot notification. 300, but I'm in Little Rock, it's different. Every type of business falls under a category that has a different notification distance. So I think we could possibly look at what, like for an event center or for, God forbid, a correctional center or anything like that where the footage is different. So I think moving forward, if we would address that, having 300 feet of notification with something that doesn't have 300 feet around them, I think that's pretty ridiculous. I think that we need to extend that based on the type of business that's going in. And I don't want to put this off another 2 weeks. God knows these people have been through the ringer and they have earned the right to move forward in their business. I'm not in the business of telling people what they can do with their property that they own. But I would like to go ahead and get the vote out and get them moving forward. But in the future, let's address this distance, this notification distance.
Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Mosley.
Yeah, the real blame to me was rezoning if we're talking about how long this has been and what's to blame and who's to blame and all that. The real blame should go on the fact that I think that the city council rezoned this from open space to begin with. I think that was misjudgment. I think that was a bad choice. That needed to stay open space, and if it was going to be developed in any manner, it needed to be done under the open space, as would have been possible. But anyway, we're here where we are. The majority of the council, I think, erred, but we are where we are. And yeah, there is a plan already in place. So there's a fallback. If we turn it down, they've got to go back to the previous plan. But so there we're between a rock and a hard place. We're all just trying to make the best of a bad situation that developed, and people didn't get notified, and so if we proceed forward tonight, I'm going to go ahead and first I'd like to ask Mr. Ashcraft and perhaps Ms. Parker. There's been some discussion between them about an advisory board, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that. They've got some wording here set up to where the Maumelle would somehow or another adopt this and could unadopt it and that sort of thing. I don't know if that's appropriate, the city being involved, but I would like to know if there's an intent to actually do an advisory board and that sort of thing. I think there is, but I just want to hear it so everybody else can hear it.
Really quickly, before we get there, I'd like to address a question. I was talking to the city attorney earlier, who formed an opinion as to whether the city could put that as a condition. I know that was a proposed, that was one of the proposed conditions. Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, I received Ms. Parker's, actually I believe all the council members received her proposed conditions and proposed bylaws or suggested bylaws. I think it's admirable for the community and business owners to communicate with one another, certainly, and be good neighbors to one another. I don't think this kind of advisory board procedure is appropriate as a condition on a conditional use. And I'm not sure that the city council could delegate its authority in that way. So I don't think it would be appropriate as a condition on a conditional use permit.
Okay.
Although I do think it is admirable for them to speak to one another and consult one another, certainly.
Thank you, sir. I didn't want to cut off this as a conversation, but I think I thought it would be helpful to put some sort of framework on it before we.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll comment on it. I think the term advisory board itself, we've had almost an anaphylactic reaction inside of our side of it to that term. However, as I said in the beginning to this, I mean, you guys aren't going to get any private business in America to come in and agree to form an advisory board on its private business by citizens. What I can pledge to you is that open line of communication and that willingness to continue to hear, see, and work with my neighbors. Again, it does me no good to continually step on the toes of the people that live around the business I'm trying to operate. So how we achieve that in the future remains to be seen, the vessel in which that travels in, but our commitment to remaining good neighbors and having a line to communicate remains in place. So that's what I would say about that.
Okay, thank you. Well, at this point, I'll go ahead and make a motion to defer this for 2 weeks to give the remaining city council members that haven't had a tour to take a hard look and maybe perhaps alleviate or their concerns or whatever, and for the residents to perhaps be able to take a tour. So I'll make that motion that we defer for 2 weeks.
I have a motion and a second to defer resolution 2023-01 for 2 weeks. Mr. City Attorney?
If Councilmember Mosley had suggested multiple council members going on the tour at the same time, It's currently the view of the Municipal League and myself that when multiple council members are together, that constitutes a public meeting under FOIA. Therefore, it must be recorded and we must give notice.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There's a motion and second to defer this for 2 weeks. Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, sir. Personally, I'm not going to vote for a deferral. I don't think anything is going to change in the next 2 weeks. This has been reviewed many times, and I don't know what positive will come out of a 2-week deferral. I took the opportunity to reach out and go tour the site myself, and I'm ready to vote tonight. I don't know what else can come out of this that would be productive in the next 2 weeks.
Councilmember Shin?
Mr. Mosley said there's a couple of things he would like to see added. I don't see how we can add those without some discussion. So, and it could be after we go take a look at that property, we may want something we want to add. That's why I think we should wait 2 weeks.
Councilmember Gardner?
And the reason I'm fine moving forward is the 2 conditions that he mentioned are already included in the preliminary development plan, and we will make those amendments and move forward, so. Unless you have another conditional use or that you wanted to add.
Well, there'd be 2 or 3 I'd bring up after we, if we approve that one. There's some others that I would go ahead and suggest and see if we can adopt tonight, but I do think it would be much easier for everybody to vote on them if they've kind of got a little bit of the lay of the land. It's mainly about lighting, noise, some no parking places and some things like that.
Councilmember Gronwald?
As to the things that you just mentioned, I think those have all been addressed. The lighting, and maybe Mr. Ashcraft can answer those, but I feel like those have already been addressed. And the parking, I think we've talked about the parking quite a bit today, 335 and 135 and where it is and seeing the drawing. So I'm not sure what the condition would be to add as far as that. But as far as the lighting, that's been addressed, has it not?
It has. I mean, and again, as I said in the planning commission and when I was called on at the subcommittee meetings, I mean, our lighting is completely dictated by city code. And so I'm not the city attorney, I'm not any kind of attorney, hell. I just, any additional language would simply be redundant and repetitive, in my opinion. I mean, the ordinances are what they are with lighting, as far as I understand it anyway. And so, I mean, we're not setting out to violate any city ordinances with our lighting plan. I mean, again, our whole aesthetic with this building is to look like a country club. That doesn't involve spotlights, even though Mr. Craig Adams jokingly said he'd like to see a bat signal out there. It's not in the plans to do such. Everything we want to have is low to the ground on the building and conforms above and beyond what city ordinance dictates we have to do.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, you've mentioned you want to do low-level lighting and that any high level you would aim to the ground, and that's all I would put in there. And I'm assuming that's still your plan. And so, I mean, it would just be sticking it in there, but.
I guess, so some of those things were the types of things that we were looking at in the preliminary development plan, if we got there. Was that condition, Mr. Grummer, some of the conditions we thought would better fit the conditional use permit and some might better fit the preliminary development plan?
The lighting would better fit the preliminary development plan.
Okay, thank you.
And we review photometric plans as part of our building designs, and a lot of the concerns would be placed there after all this.
And then just a reminder that the motion on the floor and the topic of discussion is the motion to defer this resolution for 2 weeks. Is there any additional discussion on the motion to defer this for 2 weeks? All those in favor of deferring resolution 2023-01 for 2 weeks and 1 day, since the council meeting is on a Tuesday, go ahead and say yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. No. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Holt?
No.
Councilmember Shin?
Yes.
Councilmember Tierney?
No.
Councilmember Williams? Councilmember Gardner.
No.
Councilmember Grunwald.
No.
Councilmember Mosley.
Yes.
Motion fails for lack of majority. Councilmember Gardner,
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2023-01.
I've got a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2023-01. Before we proceed to a vote with that, there was a question earlier about what we'd be voting on. Did you have any questions on that?
No, I think we've cleared it up, because we just talked about the development plan versus the conditional use permit, so I'm clear on that if everybody else is.
Great, so we've got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2023-01. Councilmember Mosley?
So I'd like to modify, add a condition to the conditional use permit to limit the capacity to 400 people.
Mr. Grummer, was that one of the conditions that is on the preliminary development plan?
Well, it's not a condition on the preliminary development plan, but the occupancy is stated on the preliminary development plan, which was 500. The applicant requested to lower it to 400. So being on there, we can refer back to that. But again, if you want it on the CUP, you can.
Thank you. Mr. Mosley, I don't think it's inappropriate on the conditional use. I think that at least when I was talking with Scott earlier, we thought that by amending it in the preliminary development plan from the current occupancy level to a reduced one would be best appropriate there. Nonetheless, I don't think it's inappropriate for the conditional use permit.
I'd like to go ahead and try it on this. Let's put it on this.
Okay, I have a motion to add a condition that the occupancy level be at 400. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Gardner?
It's already stated on the development plan, correct? So what's the, I guess
Yes.
what I'm asking is what would be the limiting factor here? I mean, it's already going to be 400.
Well, I
So-
believe it's 500 on the preliminary development plan, or was that already changed?
It's a condition to be changed, but it was approved for 400.
Okay. What? I'll ask the question.
It shows 500 on there right now, but they've requested it to be 400, so when the final development plan comes in, we will be approving a final development plan with an occupancy of 400 on the development plan. It's not physically there right now, but it will be.
And that is based on agreement by the applicant?
Yes.
Okay. In a case like this, I think I'd just recommend that the occupancy be added by the council, as it's the council determining it at this point.
Would that, I guess, to kind of go along with my question, if it's on the conditional use permit, if that wanted to be modified at a future date, that would have to come back to the council as a new conditional use permit where a change would be made in the future?
It'd just be an amendment to the conditional use.
Okay, so it's okay to have it both places then, okay. All right.
I think it might be easier actually to change it from the conditional use because it seems, that's gonna be more apparent because it is an actual permit to the actual use versus the development plan. It may be more stronger on the CUP.
Okay.
All right, Councilmember Mosley?
I don't think I had anything else. I think we all came to agreement it's okay to put it on there, so that, I think we're good.
We need to vote on it.
Yes, I've still got public comment cards, council member comments.
That was-
Councilmember Williams?
That was my question. This will not slow this down. We can still vote on this tonight. If we add it tonight, we still can vote on this conditional use tonight.
Yes, ma'am. It becomes a question for the city attorney as to whether that becomes a material change requiring another reading.
No, I don't believe so.
So yes, we can vote on it tonight, and it doesn't require the city clerk to read it again. Any additional discussion on the motion to add a condition to the conditional use permit that the occupancy level be changed from 500 to 400? No discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
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 All opposed, no. Motion carries. Resolution 2023-01 is hereby amended to show that the occupancy level is now 400 as a condition on the conditional use permit. Councilmember Mosley.
Yes, I'd like to propose another amendment or another condition. I'd like to propose that all events be contained inside the building as opposed to outdoor events.
Councilmember Gardner.
I wouldn't vote for that because I've been to weddings and events like this, and as Mr. Ashcraft mentioned, well, the one that I was in was a one-room setup, and after the wedding, they kicked us all outside as they flipped the room and prepared it. So to say that you can't have members go outside, you're basically confining them to the inside of a building, and they can't enjoy the beautiful view of the Arkansas River. So I wouldn't ever vote for them to be able to have it all inside.
Councilmember Mosley.
I think, I don't mind people going out. There's a veranda out there. People are going to be going outside and that sort of thing in the normal course of an event, but just indoor events as opposed to an outdoor concert or something like that. But he's also already said he's not going to do concerts, but that's what I'm saying is just keep, they're indoor events.
Mr. City Attorney.
I would just remind the council members that conditions that are placed on the permit will have to be enforceable by the code enforcement officers, so it needs to be clear enough to the code enforcement people to know, and of course to the operators to know whether they're violating the permit or not. If they do end up violating the permit, they're at risk of it being revoked by the council. So if a few people go outside, maybe to have a quieter conversation, does that mean that the event is outside? Those are the kinds of, I would just remind the council that it does have to be enforced. Yeah.
I understand. That is a problem. I'll withdraw that one. I will make one more, that the event center will not hold the following type of events: concerts, fairs, sporting events, and expos. Again, this is something that the group would like to limit, and I'm making that motion on their behalf.
I've got a motion on the floor to prohibit concerts, fairs, sporting events, and expos at this location. Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of second. Councilmember Gronwald?
Never mind, that just took care of my thought.
Is there any other discussion on Resolution 2023-01? Councilmember Mosley?
I'm not going to make any more motions. I just will trust Mr. Ashcraft and to work with the neighbors, and he's promised to do that on this one here. I may make another one under the development plan, but right now I'm not going to make any more. Thank you. I'm ready to vote, I guess.
Do we have a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-01? Okay. And a second. All right. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2023-01 as amended, please signify by saying yes.
Yes. Yes.
All
Yes.
opposed? No. Motion passes. Resolution 2023-01 is adopted. That brings us to Resolution 2023-02. Before we have a reading, I would request a motion to amend the resolution. There's a part that says the application seeking approval of a revised preliminary development plan for Venue 10 in City of Maumelle, Pulaski County, Arkansas, dated December 1st, 2022, which is attached here too as Exhibit A, is hereby approved as recommended by the Planning Commission. There are additional exhibits that were intended to serve as part of the preliminary development plan, and those are exhibits B through E. So I would ask that a motion be made to add, to amend it from just saying Exhibit A to exhibits A through E.
So moved.
I've got a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion on that? Councilmember Williams. All those in favor of that, please say yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries. With that, Madam City Clerk, if you could please read resolution number 2023-02, approving a preliminary development plan.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, a resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2023-02, a resolution approving the revised preliminary development plan for the property titled Venue 10.
Thank you. Mr. Grummer, did you have any specific comments to the preliminary development plan that you had in reserve and saved for this exact moment in time? Seeing none, I'll open up the floor for discussion. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I'll make at the time the motion is made, I'll go ahead and add a couple of conditions or propose a couple of conditions.
Would you like to?
I guess I could do them now, right?
It might be easier to do that rather than have a motion, have to amend the motion.
Okay, all right, let's do that then. I'd like to make a first of all, let me ask Mr. Grummer, there was a landscape plan approved the other night. One of the biggest concerns of the residents around the place is that we have enough screening to prevent headlights and other lighting to be almost a nuisance or whatever. And as far as traffic and just lighting from the parking lot and that sort of thing. And I know that there was something mentioned about that while you guys were doing the preliminary or the landscape plan. How much of that is going to be handled by the city on that?
So the Planning Commission, when you look at the landscape plan, which was added as Exhibit E, it showed a lot of existing trees along the northeast side that would be blocking visual effects of light and whatnot to the adjacent properties, but that's no longer there because of some of the clearing that's happened. So during the meeting, the Planning Commission agreed and approved to allow staff to work with the developer to add additional landscaping as needed, as well as working with the residents to make sure that we're getting the proper screening, such as the right size shrubs and whatnot to protect from vehicle lighting onto adjacent properties. So that's an ongoing, that's something that we're going to be adding to, and staff is going to be working with to make sure that happens. But if you'd like to add a note to the development plan stating that appropriate screening to prevent vehicular
light pollution?
Light pollution, yes. Thank you.
Okay, that's exactly the motion I'd like to make then. That we make that as a condition, appropriate screening to avoid light pollution.
Light pollution to the residential properties?
Yes.
I've got a motion second on that. Councilmember Gardner?
I guess, Director Grummer, my question on that is, the landscape plan they've already agreed to work with staff. What's the difference if we add this condition on there? You would be doing that anyway, wouldn't you?
We would, but if you would just be putting it in writing on the development plan that forces their hand to do it. But this is one of the things, it's.
I just don't, I guess I don't want to wade off into details that I feel like the planning commission and staff should handle and are better trained to handle. I agree with the concept, and I think that's important that the surrounding residences are protected, but I come into this as not a landscaper, and the planning commission looks at it, staff looks at it, and so I guess I just don't feel comfortable as a council member putting additional conditions on a landscape plan when staff is going to be looking at it anyway.
One of the, if I could really quick,
yeah,
one of the
please.
things we did by incorporating Exhibit E in this case, which is the landscape plan, into the preliminary development plan, was make it so that not only was the landscaping, which is approved at the planning commission level, but elevating that and actually attaching it to the preliminary development plan, I think strengthens what it is, and strengthens, in my opinion, how Scott's authority to help ensure that the lighting is good to go. I have one of the reoccurring themes that I continue to hear since we began talking about this tonight is how the applicant has gone above and beyond to have those discussions. And so I don't think he's going to fight too much, but personally I tend to, it's both reasonable to say we want proper light pollution barriered or proper shrubbery or walls or whatever the case may be. Ultimately, it's going to end up being Mr. Grummer's department working to make that happen. So.
And I think that's why I don't think I want to vote for that, just because I want staff to handle it. And I think with what the mayor said of attaching that, I feel confident that staff will handle it personally.
What this will do, I think, is just provide some emphasis, I guess, that the council's concerned about this. And I don't, Mr. Mayor, do you have any personal thoughts on this kind of stuff? You know, what do you?
You know what my thoughts are that my thoughts are not the ones that are best. I know Scott is knee deep in, he's probably neck deep or forehead deep in this, that I trust Scott's opinion wholeheartedly on that. And from what I've seen, Mr. Ashcraft, I think we talked once some time back. From what I've heard from even those people that were opposed, at least in part to the project, has gone pretty above and beyond. And it looks, I feel like we need to let you have the mic to respond to that, because I feel like you're about to.
No, I think it's.
If you could step up to the mic, please, sir.
Sure. I think that. So I'm looking at the same list that he has. I don't know if y'all have it of the proposed things, and the way it's written here, it's.
Well, so the motion that would be. I don't
His
want to say it doesn't
particular
matter what's written there. We're not adopting that. It would just be strictly whatever the language of the motion would be. And I'm sure the city clerk wrote down the language of that motion.
Again, I don't know y'all's process. This point that Mr. Mosley's bringing up was a direct, came from the meeting yesterday. Specifically, it involved several of the residents, but specifically Mr. Breen and Miss Bennon in their house over across the driving range. And however it needs to read, make it read that way. Their concern is that we actually got a tour of their home last night and looked at it from their master bedroom to see what they were looking at. And so if a car is parked out there on the edge, if it's remote started and the lights are running, that we're shielding it. And again, I think it's covered in the plan as it is, but however y'all need to word this, you're not going to catch any resistance from our side on it. Okay. So we just wanted, as part of our discussions yesterday, and
Perfect. What was the precise language of the motion?
I wrote down, Councilmember Mosley, he made a motion for appropriate screening to prevent light pollution.
To the residential areas.
Yeah, to the residential areas, added, and Councilmember Tierney seconded the motion.
As worded, that does not sound like the end of the world. Councilmember Williams?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we need to avoid redundancy. I mean, we're putting everything everywhere, and I think it's bogging us down. We're getting lost in these details.
Councilmember Williams, I'm going to argue with you for a second. I think you're kind of right.
Well,
On
thank you.
the other hand, we've got an applicant who says that it's not too bad. I think he had some concerns with maybe the way it was written there. I think that the motion as written gives the planning director and his team the ability to work with the residents and the applicant, both of whom I'm sure he will continue to be in contact with for some time. And I think it instills confidence in the public that the
And I
council was
understand,
hearing
but
this.
my point being, you know, if it's already in Exhibit E, I mean, if we already have a landscape plan, why are we, it's already in the preliminary plan, why are we wanting to add it to the preliminary plan? That's my point.
I think the one thing that I like is the fact that you're giving me the authority to make those decisions as much. Because a lot of times if it's not drawn in on the paper here, then I'm the one, and if I say you need to do this and they say, well, it's not on the plan, I can say, well, the city council and planning commission gave me the authority to do this in order to protect the interest of the residents, if I feel it's in the best interest of.
And that's what I agree with.
Thank you. All right, I believe we have a motion and a second to require appropriate screening to prevent light pollution toward the residential areas. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Does everyone understand the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no? No. Motion passes. Any additional discussion? Councilmember Grunwald?
I don't have a problem with it going in there, especially because we said earlier that any kind of conditions that we add, we can still vote on tonight, right? It's not gonna hold that up, that process up. And so certainly if Mr. Ashcraft says there's no problem and, you know, Mr. Grimmer says that it makes him feel better, it makes the residents feel, I have no problem with that. My only thought is, I just wanna make sure that the country club is going to be, if we're gonna put that in writing, I wanna make sure that they're kind of held to the same standards for light pollution and noise pollution, which I think we already have in our codes anyway. But I just wanna make sure that they're held to the same standards because they have the same parking lot headlight issues. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, one last motion to make an amendment, and this involves the city, actually. The residents were concerned that live on Parr Drive, and that is when you first go into the country club entrance. I think it's the first right as you go in the country club entrance. In the past, when there's been events at the club, a lot of people park on either side of that little narrow road that goes in there, and the residents were really wanting to see the city post no parking signs along there to try to eliminate that parking because I think it's a congestion issue. You didn't have any problem with that, did you, Mr. I don't believe that. This is actually.
I don't believe that concerns us on Park Drive.
Okay. So anyway, it's something I'd like to put in there that we'd like to see the city post, make a motion to post no parking signs along Parr Drive.
Mr. Grummer?
Well, so Parr Drive is not part of the development plan or the conditional use, so that's kind of out of the bounds of what you're actually. But what I would probably recommend, if that's something that City Council would want, that I think the mayor working with Public Works could look at that and provide no parking signs if it is, because I believe that is a public street.
I think it would need to go to the Parking and Traffic Committee.
Okay.
Who oversees parking.
All right.
So would you like to withdraw that motion? There was no second, so it's only,
Yeah, it's gone. So anyway, yeah, I'm ready to vote. Thank you.
You're withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Councilmember Gardner?
It's a moot point at this point, but I was just gonna say, Par Drive at some point becomes private. Right, and so I don't even know, do we have the authority to even, I don't wanna take up any more time, that's just something to consider. That's a private drive at some point, and we need to consider if we even have, if it's even city property. So-
Not at the part where it gets private, which is where it narrows down,
Okay, thank you.
if memory serves. All right. Do we have a motion and second to adopt 23-02? Did someone make a motion? Councilmember Gardner.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-02.
We've got a motion. Was there a second? A motion and a second to approve resolution number 2023-02 as amended. Is there any additional discussion on that motion? Councilmember Mosley.
Just want to thank everybody for their patience tonight, trying to do things here to make things in between. But and I'm going to vote yes on this because I'm convinced that the developer group is going to work with the residents and make this right. So and I don't think it's any worse than the plan that's already for the residents and the plans on there based on my tour. So I will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any additional discussion on the motion to adopt resolution number 2023-02? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you all. And if I may, thank you to the applicant and to the residents for working together. Thank you to the city council for what I think was a controversial issue that was handled professionally and tactfully by all involved. So thank you very much. With that, we will move on to the first reading of ordinance 1085, annexation of land from Ascent Development Property. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, resolution number 2023-02. No,
We're on ordinance 1085.
I'm sorry. Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1085, an ordinance accepting the annexation of land commonly known as the Ascent Development Property to be titled the Ascent Development Annexation to the City of Maumelle, Arkansas, and making the Ascent Development Property a part of the City of Maumelle and for other purposes.
Thank you. Mr. Grummer, would you like to introduce this? I do, as, okay. Sorry, go ahead.
So if you're familiar with the map, the parcel is located just at the corner of White Oak, or kind of not really on the corner, but at White Oak Crossing and Short Marché. The parcel itself, the majority of it is inside the floodway and the floodplain, so it's undevelopable. I believe the owner has sold it off for tax credits, if I'm not mistaken, for watershed credits. But there is a small portion of the property that could be developed, which fronts Short Marché. But we don't see anything happening there anytime in the near future, just based on the location where it's at. So that they've requested to be zoned PRD, the rest to be zoned in the open space or floodway zone. Otherwise, the petition's been filed with the county, and we're just waiting on the public hearing to be set by the judge, which I believe is in process. So by the time this gets to the third reading, then we hope to have everything resolved through the county and their release.
Thank you, sir. Did the applicant or applicant's representative want to make a comment or just be available should there be any questions? Okay. All right, I'll go ahead and open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Mosley.
Again, I paused to give everybody else a chance. I've got a few questions. One, what is the how will the annexation of this property benefit Maumelle residents? And is it buildable in any way?
Eric Holloway, 116 Timberland Trail. It, the 2.5 acres that we still retain as ownership on is developable against Short Marche. We have no plan to develop it anytime future. I don't think we would develop it until the road is opened up to the interchange, but who knows when that will ever happen. But as it is today, it is developable. The rest of the property is not, which I think it's like 46 total acres, so 44 or 43.5 are not developed.
Okay, so what portion do you own or assent?
We have the 2.5 acres that's right against Short Marche. So when we sold the land it's actually for the landowner that owns the land around, in North Little Rock that's around McDonald's on Mama Boulevard. There's a lot of wetlands on that property, so they wanted to do a exchange for wetland credits. And so they bought that property for us so they can get their permit through the Corps. I made a condition upon the sale that they petition for this annexation. I wanted the annexation for 2 reasons. One, I didn't want her to be able to timber the property. I'm pleased with the city's ability to stop that from happening, so I wanted to come into the city so that, I live and see these trees that are behind my house, so I was going to do the best I could to protect them. And then also, my residents that are in my neighborhood that are a part of Maumelle walk these trails that are against this, and they have constantly complained to me about hunters that are against the trail, and I just kind of wanted that protection, and the city offers that protection.
Okay. Would you not have, okay, you don't own that land anymore?
I don't, but I did make it a part of the sale that they annexed into the city of Maumelle.
Okay. Wouldn't posted no hunting signs do it? Or is that just,
in the county, they would have the right to hunt, so,
even if the owner doesn't want it?
they could do no trespassing, but again, I would have no control on whether they maintain that no trespassing.
Okay.
So my only way to control it was to ask for annexation.
Okay. Is there, any plans to donate that as a park or anything like that by the McDonald's folks, or?
Once they deed restrict it, it's really beyond being able to timber it, because oddly, if you cut it and leave leave the tree from about 6 inches above the ground, then you're not actually impacting as many of us have seen the clearing along Walmart where the wetland exists. You can actually do that. So I think that's the only protection.
Okay. So that's a good reason. That'd be something that'd benefit the residents, leaving the trees there. If it's easier to do that in the county, which it would be, harvest the trees, so.
And I think the long-term along White Oak Bio, and it gives us another big piece of White Oak Bio to be able to do that.
Yeah, is there something that's going to benefit us down the road too by having that property? Is there something contiguous to it that might open up some commercial development or something?
I certainly would like to see nature trails. I think a lot of people probably follow that. The fact that I'm constantly out there taking pictures of animals and everything else, but I would love to see that open up to the public and have those kinds of trails. And there's nothing about the core restriction that would keep that from happening. So I like that idea as well as being part of the city.
Yeah, White Oak Bayou goes right up through the middle of.
It's through the middle of this property.
Yeah. So just for those that aren't as familiar, when Mr. Holloway was talking about the folks that own some other property in this, in the White Oak Bayou Basin, they can, if you're wanting to develop within certain areas, you need to offset it and protect other property. And so the ultimate goal or the idea behind the bulk of that property is that it becomes protected wetland that can be used to offset other development in North Maumelle. So up closer to 40 in that vicinity. In the area that we often refer to as the Brown property, though I have no clue who still owns it.
It is still there.
Yeah.
So basically, he would use this land to, maybe he'd clear some land there at McDonald's, but he'd be able to offset it with this. That's correct?
That's correct.
All right. So this will stay pristine as far as what he's wanting to do.
As I said, the core permit does not restrict them from clearing.
Yeah.
above a certain level.
Which is one of the reasons, oddly enough, hear what I'm about to say.
No,
You're
he's
not going to
surprised.
hear it very often. One of the reasons for annexing it in is that it is not very easy in Maumelle to cut down trees. And we protect them in a way that the county does not protect them.
Okay.
And so if annexed, it then has to go through our timber management plan or other pretty arduous requirements before you can timber it. So what I say you're not going to hear very often is Mr. Holloway saying that he is excited about the timber management plan and hopes that it won't be, that'll protect the trees. in that area.
For new council members, I was the one that sponsored that, so anyway.
In this case, I will admit to being excited about it. Honestly, though, I mean, it does give me the protection if somebody did try to, they still could clear the land and go through the city to get the timber management plan, but it gives me the opportunity to come to the council and argue against that and all my neighbors, and that's about the best I can do.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got.
Any additional discussion? This is still on first reading. If there's no further discussion, this will be on second reading at the next city council meeting. All right, with that, we will move on to the first reading of ordinance 1086, amending the Maumelle Land Use Plan. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Yes, a little bigger. Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1086, an ordinance amending the Maumelle Land Use Plan and map and for other purposes.
Mr. Grummer. Come on down.
So I think the map says it all again. It's floodway and open space for the majority of it, and PRD and SUR for the small part. They wanted that as residential until future time, whenever things develop out as to what the future use may be, but that's what they asked for it to come in at.
Any discussion on ordinance 1086? Seeing none, it'll be on second reading at the next city council meeting. With that, we'll move on to ordinance 1087, amending the Maumelle zoning map. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled Ordinance Number 1087, an ordinance amending the Maumelle zoning map and for other purposes.
Like the land use plan, this has open space, floodway, and then PRD. You can see that as Exhibit B, might be the easiest way to see that. Thank you to the Planning and Permits Department for the handy map that I've already learned to take for granted. Any discussion on ordinance 1087? Seeing none, it'll be on second reading at the next city council meeting. With that, we will move on to resolution 2023-03, approving a preliminary development plan. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, a resolution to be entitled, Resolution number 2023-03, a resolution approving the preliminary development plan for the property titled Phase 1 and 2 Cypress Bend at Maumelle Crossing.
All right, I do have a public comment card on this. Mr. Wright? Not unless you have to. You just wanted me to know that you were available if needed. Mr. Grummer, come on down and introduce this to the City Council. Could you please state your name?
Scott Grummer, Director of Planning and
Thank you,
Permits
sir.
for the City of Maumelle. I haven't done that yet, have I? I'm sorry about that. So on this one, I've determined that I could argue till the cows come home, and I'll never win on this one. But either way, this has been back and forth to Planning Commission, City Council several times. This was approved for Phase 1 and 2, and the actual builder had come in, and we met with my inspectors and had a pre-construction meeting prior to building permits being issued. And first off, I want to say that my inspectors were very impressed with the builder who came in, their quality of how they go about construction. So very excited there. The only concern that came up during that meeting was they had provided us building plans of less than 1,500, some around 1,200 square feet and whatnot. And when it came through the approval process, the approvals were based on a minimum of 1,500 square feet. And for the city, we felt that was a material change because in your typical R1 zones, your R1 determines what your minimum square foots are. In PRDs, just like setbacks and front and side setbacks, those have to be set so that we know what to regulate when the buildings come in. And if you go around the entire city, you'll see neighborhoods with varying degrees of square footage requirements based on, in a PRD, what those development plans are based on. So I didn't want to approve building permits for houses less than what was approved by so it came back through. Staff made recommendations to the Planning Commission, and the staff report was provided to you as Exhibit B in your packet. And you'll find that based on the recommendation of Planning Commission, all of staff comments were recommended to be considered with the exception of 2 items, and one of those was they preferred for no square footage or the square footage limitations to be based on R1 standards, which is not less than 1,000 square feet, and then design standards for the houses to be based on R1 standards by our code. And that's it.
Thank you, sir. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Mosley?
Yeah, I liked Mr. Drummer's previous approved plan better with the square footage and that sort of thing. And I know there's an argument that you're talking about blue in the face, and I think Mr. Wright has the opposite argument about square footage and that sort of thing. But I'm inclined to stick with Mr. Drummer and to vote no on this and make them toe the line on what it was he approved the first time. And so I think the residents of my ward, which are out there in Country Club, I think they prefer the higher square footage and that sort of thing. So I'm going to vote no, and I hope everybody else will, so that because basically they did not comply with what was approved, and Mr. Drummer had to catch them, as I understand it. So. Anyway, that's my thought on it. And I'd welcome Mr. Wright if he wants to say anything about it too.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gardner?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Mosley, to your point, I would have preferred a little history. This was designed as a completely different neighborhood initially, right? And you see the big central park that goes through it. It was going to be a completely different neighborhood. Unfortunately, that ship we've talked about ship sailing a lot. That ship has sailed as well with the way that it has developed in our neighboring city of North Little Rock, right across the street, with some additional homes going in. And I also have questions about whether or not legally this is zoned as R1, whether the city can even put restrictions, because state law is pretty clear, and I may ask the city attorney over there, but the city cannot act as an architectural control committee, is my understanding, like a POA could. So I don't even know if the city can put, if it's an R1, if we can say you have to have 1,500 square feet. That could be challenged possibly. So I know the staff wanted that, and I understand why. And there's also some questions about materials that could be used for the exterior of the house. And I understand why, but I don't know if the city would even get that through courts if they were to challenge it. So that was one comment. My other question was, and I don't know if the city even has the ability to regulate what is in a bill of assurance. I've talked about this with a number of different folks. I had a concern over the green space that was there. And looking at the bill of assurance that was in the planning commission packet, the POA has to be stood up before a building permit can be issued. However, there's also language in the planning commission packet about how the POA can also be dissolved pretty easily. If there are some things about if the board is missing a member, then it can be dissolved after a period of 3 months. Or they can assign, they can decide to dedicate this space to the city. And so I was wondering about whether or not, I know they have to have a POA stood up to get the building permits issued, but if there comes a point in the future when the POA has issues, that it's then dissolved, and it uses language in here about the city of Maumelle thereafter shall have the right to try to go and get these assessments that are set forth. It's basically saying we could become the collection agency for the POA. I don't know if we could even accept that responsibility. I don't like wading off into POA business either. I think from what I understand, they could go file a different bill of assurance later and amend it, possibly. I don't know how that works. These are a lot of legal questions that I had. But this is a very large green space, and after serving and standing up a POA myself in a neighborhood of 800 homes, we have to recruit and try to get members to fill a 7-person board. And we actively have to go out and ask somebody to serve. So I want to vote for this neighborhood. I do. I think it's a needed housing type. I don't know if we can put those restrictions on it that that staff wanted. But I also don't like having to discuss a bill of assurance. And I'm wondering if down the road in 15 or 20 years, the council members that are sitting here are going to have a Garden Oaks alleyway discussion about a Central Park that's not been maintained. So again, I want this neighborhood. I think we need the housing style like this. I just have some questions that I don't know if anybody in this room has an answer to. So I just wanted to, I had to get that off my chest and pose those questions, because I don't want a future council to be having a discussion about what do we do with this park space that's in this community. Because I think the council made the right decision on Garden Oaks, because I think that would have become a cancer on that area if the council had not dealt with that. I don't know who all was on the council then, but I think that would have become a detriment to that entire area had that not been resolved, and those homeowners would have had issues. And so I just wanted to mention that and get it off my chest. If anybody in the audience, applicant, whoever, has comments on that, I would welcome them. I don't know where we are with that.
I think that I can answer. Eric Holloway, 116 Timberland Trail, right across the street from this development. First off, I want to take up for the city planner. This is PRD, so it is debatable as to whether or not you can impose those restrictions. I don't know that it would. There is a state law that was passed to try to prevent, that it's not fair trade to restrict to a certain specific material type, and then I think that was the intent of the state law. But because it's PRD, there's a provision in that law that kind of gives some possible flexibility, and I'll defer to the city attorney to discuss that. But so I think that is somewhat debatable. I guess my problem with, we have an R1 restriction. It's lasted for a long time. We have nice homes throughout the city. We want, and that is the most restrictive standard we have in the city. So I feel like that's the most appropriate for these small, low-income homes. My neighborhood, which again is right across the street, we don't have anything that has 100% brick. I have almost 40% vinyl on my house. So I don't like the idea of trying to make these, those types of restrictions. You brought up what's happened in North Little Rock. That definitely has impacted. We really wanted to do a completely different type of development. We wanted to do 500,000 to even higher type homes, but that is just not going to work next to a storage and to other low-income housing that's just right on top of it. So that ship sailed, as you said, once those happened in North Little Rock. So I think we're doing the best we can and working with what is there. And if we try to impose these restrictions, what we'll end up with is a neighborhood that never gets built. And if you go out there and you look, I don't like, there is one neighborhood where they're doing all brick and one where they're doing mixed types because the landowner made it a part of their sale, and it just has this somewhat ugly homogeneous look in the all brick. So I kind of like the different mixed building types and colors that come with adding different materials. So I'm just not a fan of the restriction, and I know that the builder doesn't like the restriction as well. And it doesn't sell as well, so they want to give the people that are coming in better options to have better looking homes.
How about the POA? Any advice?
That's a tough one. There's some language that I think you called me about earlier today that you were concerned about, that it would turn it over to the city. But I think you think about the Garden Oaks situation. Had there been a succession plan for when a POA went defunct or couldn't handle something in the original documents, then that might have solved that issue, and it'd been easier for the city to take care of that. And at least in this bill of assurances, I've read it, and I don't write bill of assurances. I rarely even look at them, to be honest with you. It has that attempt to create a succession plan if the POA was to go defunct. But I think that that's something that Rouse Coleman has learned, and that's the eventual builder, with the many, many neighborhoods that they've done, that there are other cities and other states that kind of require that succession plan. So I think that's why that's written into that document. But I could see also the city worried that immediately next week are going to turn it over to the city. But I know that's not the intent, and that's not what has been discussed with me. But and they intend to take that park space and maintain it. But I guess we've probably heard that before.
I can, so before the planning commission, so there is a law that restricts municipalities, and also there's another law that restricts counties from regulating residential design standards. And that also includes, like, the facade. And it also, one of the other things it forbids regulation of is minimum square footage. There is a list of exceptions to when that law applies. As Mr. Holloway said, it's arguable that a PRD might fit one of those exceptions. Another one of those exceptions is when the property owner is in agreement with the city, with the municipality on the regulation. As the planning commission, so the planning commission had rejected staff's proposal for 100% brick and for a higher minimum square footage. And if I recall correctly, Mr. Holloway had requested to be held to the R1 standard for design and for 1,000 square feet. Is that right?
That's correct. And that's similar to the Stone Canyon that we just came in with. I mean, so we just recently, established a neighborhood that did not have those standards, and now we're going to impose, and I really have not understood completely why this would be any different than the other.
So, if the city council imposes what the planning commission approved, which was holding them to R1 standards and 1,000 square feet, no, I don't think there's any legal issue at all, because the property owner came to us and said, please impose these restrictions, R1 and 1,000 square feet minimum. I haven't formed a complete opinion on whether, if we were in disagreement with the property owner, whether we would fit under one of those exceptions, whether because it was a PRD. I haven't formed a firm opinion on that yet. The situation hasn't, of course, arisen. It might, but I'm still doing my research on that.
So on the POA aspect, do you have any concerns, or is that something that we do not really even need to be wading off into?
I'm not sure. I was curious. I haven't spoken with Mr. Grimmer about this. I don't know whether it's a common situation that's arisen, that's written into the bills of assurance, that it reverts to the city. I don't know if that's a common thing that the city imposes.
I looked at my personal bill of assurance, and it had nothing about this. So I don't know.
I presume that the rationale is just to make sure that somebody's taking care of the green space.
Right.
If you approve the plan, though, you're not approving the bill of assurance. So you're not entering into as a city, not entering into a contract with the developer or the eventual landowner or the POA. So you would still have to be required to accept, I would think, these lands or this park space, even if, no matter what they put in their bill of assurance.
That's how I would see it. It might give the city the option. The Garden Oaks Alley is a good example. It's not a contract with the city. It's not us ratifying the bill of assurance. It might, however, in 40 years, give the next or next city council the ability to come in if there's a need and try and have more teeth to it than we did with Garden Oaks. That's just a hypothetical. Again, it's not us entering into any sort of agreement, so they can say whatever the heck, they want regarding what the city is or is not going to do. It does not bind the city's actions, as we're not a party to that bill of assurance.
And it's my understanding, talking to the creators of that bill of assurance, that was the intent, that it gives the city some ability, if somewhere in the future that they need to step in and accept what's in there.
And I guess ultimately, it's green space. It's not a street that is failing. And as you and I discussed, trees may start growing up and the people may love it. Oh, it's filled with trees now. Fantastic. So, okay.
If I may, just while we're on the topic, the Planning Commission approved or recommended for approval contingent upon staff comments 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9. These are in Exhibit B, and you'll see a memo that was attached. They sort of amended staff comment 1 and staff comment 3. Those are reflected in the second whereas. So the Planning Commission's recommended approval was in accordance with staff comments except for the minimum square footage requirements and design requirements as we've just stated. So a motion to approve resolution 2023-03 would probably be best suited, very similar to the second whereas. That'd be a motion to approve resolution 2023-03 in accordance with staff comments, except the minimum square footage requirements will be in accordance with R1 standards of 1,000 square feet, and design requirements will be in accordance with R1 requirements per city code. While I've just said that, does anyone want to make that motion? So moved. That's what I was hoping for. Second. Okay, back to discussion. Does everyone understand what I just did, which is basically approve this? The motion would be to approve this resolution the same way it was recommended to the City Council from the Planning Commission. Any additional comments? Councilmember Mosley?
I'm still going to vote no for the reason I originally said, and there were two things discussed. One was the square footage and the original plan, and then the concerns about the POA and that sort of thing. So, but I'm voting no for the first thing, which is the square footage. Thank you.
Yes.
I guess the only statement that I'd like to make about that is if you hold that square footage restriction, then it's no longer, you're changing the type of development. It's no longer going to be that low-income development that we really actually do need in the city, and that really is best suited for that property based on what has happened in the neighboring lands around it. And I hope people understand that. And I think that the builder is here as well, and they could explain that they're not going to step up and buy the property based on those restrictions. So then we're going to be stuck with a completely different scenario.
Thank you, sir. Any additional discussions on the motion? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2023-03 in accordance with staff comments, except the minimum square footage requirements will be in accordance with R1 standards of 1,000 feet, and design requirements will be in accordance with R1 requirements per the city code. Everyone get that? All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion passes. Resolution 2023-03 is approved. Thank y'all. With that, we will move directly on to Resolution 2023-04, amending the 2023 General Fund Budget. Madam City Clerk, if you could please read that by title only.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas. Resolution number 2023-03, a resolution approving the preliminary development plan for the property titled Phase 1 and Phase 2 Cypress Bend at Maumelle Crossing.
Thank you,
Oh,
ma'am.
wait, no. We're on 04.
Yes,
You said 3.
Yeah, Mayor.
did it, whatever. We're on the next one.
So threw me off.
I'm gonna watch the recording. I may have said it, but I might not have.
I'm sorry. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Maumelle, County of Pulaski, State of Arkansas, a resolution to be entitled Resolution Number 2023-04, a resolution to amend the 2023 general fund budget.
All right, Liz sent me a text earlier, and said she had to pick up her daughter, and she was hoping to be here to answer your questions. Long story short, we're just rotating some money in the police department from capital to building maintenance. The council has so tied our hands that the $800 in capital must require council approval. Chief, what have you to say?
Corey Pickard, Chief of Police. I just wanted to bring to council, prices changed from the time we submitted the budget to when we're actually trying to make the repairs to the station. So wanted to bring it to the council so that y'all know what we're doing.
Motion to approve.
Here you've got a motion to approve and a second. Is there any discussion on that? Last call. All those in favor of adopting Resolution 2023-04, please signify by saying yes. Yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you all.
With that, we move on to mayor's comments. The only thing I want to draw folks' attention to is in the FYI, city offices are closed Monday, February 20th in observance of President's Day, which means the city council meeting will be Tuesday, February 21st. I also want to draw attention to the fact that the only reason that the last city council meeting was so fast was because there wasn't much business to be conducted. All right, with that, city attorney comment, or council member comments. Councilmember Mosley. Wait, whoa, Holt, you were up first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This won't take discussion. Just, I want to point out an oversight that might can be corrected next week or the next meeting. In today's agenda, item B, it talks about approving a conditional permit for Crash Events Enterprises LLC. A letter from the Planning Commission, January 23rd or 31st. They talk about recommendation for City Council for the Crash Enterprises Center, permit and all that kind of thing. But we have a letter that is from Holloway Engineering, signed by Mr. Andrews, and it's dated November 10 of 22. It says that, the second paragraph says, we also want to request a name change from the previously approved conditional use permit 2022-02 from North Winds Holdings to Crash Events. To my knowledge, Mr. Mayor, we have never voted to change that name, so thought perhaps a resolution might be in order for the next meeting.
I believe the conditional use permit, I believe the conditional use permit that was approved with 2023-01 included that it was to Crash, but we can verify. Yes. So it wasn't a separate motion to change it. We just, when we did the new conditional use permit, we replaced the other name with Crash. So according to the city attorney, we are good to go on that.
It has been approved then.
Yes, sir, the resolution that was approved tonight will issue to Crash Events Enterprises LLC. That was one of the changes that they put in their
We changed the name from North Winds.
Well, I think how I would think about it is the city council approved a permit to Crash Events Enterprises. There wasn't a separate resolution that said the name has changed. They submitted an amended application. It went through the planning commission process and it came before you today.
Right. The original, it's okay, I don't want to get into discussion, it's not that important, I want to go home. The original discussion or ordinance way back, the original one was approved to North Winds and not Crash, but it's okay. I mean, I know they requested a change and I don't remember us ever discussing it or making that change. So
Thank you, sir.
that's all I'm pointing out.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Mosley.
Yes, sir. I just wondered if you could give us an update on the Crystal Hill Road. I drove down there the other day, and I figured it might be all finished all the way to the North Little Rock boundary, but it looks like it's still underway between
Still underway.
Counts Massey.
Hey, Roy, Mr. Andrews, come on down. Yeah, I've been going out there a fair amount with all the water and fun jazz. But Mr. Andrews,
Roy Andrews, 3 Monarch Drive. I actually spoke to the contractor today. And yes, through the rain, like weekend before last, we had 3 inches of rain. And then the cold weather didn't help. Anything below freezing, we can't do earthwork, can't do gravel, can't do concrete. He is working to get that in. His next adventure on that is trying to get the driveways installed. Once we get the driveways installed, then we will proceed to fill in the gravel and get the curb done on the river side of the road. Given that it's February is the worst time of year to work outside in the state of Arkansas. I will challenge you to look back historically, and if it's gonna snow, I know we've had snow in March and I know we've had snow in January, but if it's gonna snow and it's gonna be below freezing, it's the month of February. So unfortunately, that's gonna slow us down a little bit. But he is at the point now where we've gotten the earthworks nearly done under the roadway section. He's gotten the gravel filled in. Now we're just trying to get the driveways done. Then we can bring the gravel up, get the curb done on the riverside, and work to get that path put in and finished up. And we're going to look to see what we can do to get some speed limit signs put up and try to get that pushed along. But yes, we're close to the finish line. The finish line is in sight, and it's just pushing to get that last little segment done.
Okay, so there's no contract dispute or anything at this point, and
We've worked through those items, and we feel
Okay.
like with some changes that we've done, that we're getting there, and we're trying to get it done within budget and get it completed. Yes.
good, and within budget, which is the amount of money that we had
Correct.
allocated for that
That's
project.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for that
Thank
nice
you.
update. Appreciate it.
any additional council member comments? Seeing none, we move on to city attorney comments. And then city clerk comments.
No comments.
At this point, I would probably entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and second. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for a very productive